You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Here at the New Conservative Resistance, we understand if you don't get enough of the HoloNet. So, we've made it easy for you. To find the latest on Matt Holloway, whether it be blogs or radio podcasts, go to theholonet.com or holonet.lanterns.buzz.
Good afternoon, everybody. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm your host, Matt Holloway. Today is Sunday, June the 24th in the year of our Lord 2018, and there is a ton to unpack. In a very sudden move, President Trump has made the statement that illegal immigrants should be deported, quote, without seeing a judge. That's definitely a new twist in the ongoing immigration saga. We're going to take apart, do illegal immigrants have constitutional rights in the United States? The answer is going to surprise you. In addition to that, there's been new controversy surrounding the right to refuse service here in our very own Arizona. All that and more here on the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The New Conservative Resistance begins right here, right now.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words.
The American people are frustrated because their elected officials don't listen. When we're home on the campaign trail, we say we listen. And yet something about this Senate floor, something about Washington, D.C., I don't know if it's the water, something in the air, the cherry blossom, but people get here and they stop listening to the American people.
What we witnessed here today in the Security Council is an insult. It won't be forgotten. It's one more example of the United Nations doing more harm than good in addressing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
My duty, and the sacred duty of every elected official in this chamber, is to defend Americans, to protect their safety, their families, their communities, and their right to the American dream. Because Americans are dreamers too.
I want the people of America to be able to work less for the government and more for themselves. I want them to have the rewards of their own industry. This is the chief meaning of freedom. Until we can reestablish a condition under which the earnings of the people can be kept by the people, we are bound to suffer a very severe and distinct curtailment of our liberty.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Senators, members of Congress, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. President. You had one damn job. Seriously.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
Incoming transmission.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the new conservative resistance does indeed begin right here, right now, with you. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network, and I'm Matt Holloway from Phoenix, Arizona. How you doing? Have a very, very interesting start to the week this Sunday. Glenn Beck is in the news, that's right. Glenn Beck, the CEO and founder of theblaze.com. Full disclosure, theblaze.com, where I have been a contributor in the past. You can find all that fun stuff at theblaze.com /author/Matthew-Holloway if you want to check out some of my older work. Definitely enjoyed working with that crowd. But Glenn Beck is in the news. The Daily Beast, once again, is trumpeting, "The Blaze is burning down!" Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, that's their headline from last year. This year, they're actually saying, "The Blaze implodes again." Yeah, I'm just curious, how many times is this company going to apparently be going out of business? I get that, there have been layoffs in the past, and, they really want, with their whole being, to watch Glenn Beck go down in flames, pardon the pun, but unironically posting this crap. So far, the most that's amounted to it is a really nasty exchange on CNN this morning that Glenn Beck actually tweeted out about, and I made sure that I threw in my 2 cents because I absolutely have to. Here on Twitter, if you're watching on Facebook Live, we're on Facebook Live, by the way, holonet.com. Facebook.com/HoloNet. CNN, I would say you should be ashamed of yourself if I believed you actually had the capacity for shame. Whether the Blaze and Glenn Beck are going down or not, the flames of truth and free thought that they lit are spreading, and that was just a slimy move. So Glenn Beck walked off an interview after questions about the Blaze's apparent imminent demise from CNN's Brian Stelter. I included the link in the tweet. Check it out. It's on YouTube. And honest to God, I think this was one of the sleaziest maneuvers I've ever seen in an interview. It clearly wasn't going the way Brian liked. He wasn't getting one of the gotcha moments that he was looking for at a Glenn Beck. And as a result, he just kind of casually threw out there that, "Hey, I heard your company's going out of business," more or less, paraphrasing. And then defends it with, "Well, I wanted to give him the opportunity to rebut it." No, you took a left turn in the conversation to kind of just stab him, and it was really quite disturbing. I mean, Glenn Beck was coming out swinging about how complicit the mass media is in the current immigration debacle, which is surrounding policies that have been in motion since the mid-1990s, as Beck himself attested, that were taking place under Janet Reno, to which Brian Stelter gave the weak sauce defense that, well, now it's under much greater numbers. Yes! So how I want to echo what Beck said there. How many family separations is too many? How many? And something he didn't say here, but I'm going to go ahead and throw in. When are we going to start actually blaming the parents for making a really bad decision to make one of the most perilous crossings possible on Earth with a small child? I've heard it repeated again and again. Oh, the youngest was 8 months old. Who the hell in their right mind drags an 8-month-old across the no man's land of the Sonoran Desert, attempts to cross the mountains? I mean, if you don't live in Arizona, I understand it. Maybe you don't get it. This is one of the most inhospitable spits of Earth that there is possible. I mean, you have bleak desert with no water, much of it tribal land that is largely uninhabited, or if there are habitations, they're sparse and far between, and just bleak, empty mountains. Do you know how many thousands of people die every year attempting the crossing from Mexico into the United States? It's staggering. It boggles the mind that anybody could consider it a rational decision to bring an 8-month-old child over that border. I mean, that gets me going first and foremost. But then to see CNN not get the gotcha ratings-grabbing response that they wanted out of Glenn Beck, instead getting him lambasting them and the rest of the media for their clear opportunistic exploitation of what has been an ongoing political situation for the last 2 decades, simply now pointing it out and dragging it out because their ideological foe is in office, is absolutely obscene. And Beck's not the only one calling it out. I was listening to Sargon of Akkad, a very prominent English YouTuber, calling them out equally. Benjamin Shapiro calling them on the carpet. Steven Crowder. Many of what you would consider luminaries on the right side, on the conservative side, pointing out this flagrant hypocrisy that CNN seemingly has no remorse over. It's quite disturbing. It's quite disturbing. So, I kind of broke with that first, but what I wanted to get to is the pressing question that a lot of people ask. Don't the illegal immigrants coming across the border have rights? These are human beings. They have rights. I agree with you fully. They absolutely have rights. I think I touched on this a little bit last week, probably last half hour of the show. They have rights under the Constitution of their home country. They have rights. And believe it or not, yes, they do have rights and protections under the Constitution of the United States of America. I was shocked too. It took me a minute to realize, wait, really? They have rights under the U.S. Constitution? What are those rights? How far do they extend? And it all began with a tweet from a good friend of mine and typically a ideological sparring partner, Chris Merrill. Chris Merrill tweeted out June 20th, "We are a nation of laws. Why is it so hard to understand? We follow the law. Cool. International law dictates that we allow asylum seekers to plead their case. Incarcerating children during that process is illegal. You would say that because you hate America." Nailed it. Basically playing out that argument in a one-sided fashion. To which I replied, Article 6, U.S. Constitution, "This Constitution and the laws of the U.S. which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the U.S. shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby." I had left out the additional line in Article 6 due to the lovely character cap in Twitter, which says, "Other laws of the states and this Constitution notwithstanding." So what does that mean? What's the rough translation there? You'll hear that when we take a quick break. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. We'll be right back.
I see people coming together not for divisiveness of party or for dichotomy of thought, but for unity in principle. In the principles that founded our nation, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Today, ladies and gentlemen, those principles are under the sternest attack that we have seen in many generations. It has become a crime in this nation nearly to express a difference in opinion from what is held by your party to be doctrine, from what is purported by the media to be truth. We have an opportunity to reach out to our fellow Americans regardless of their creed and regardless of their political inclinations, and unite as Americans, not as Republicans or as Democrats, as liberals or conservatives, but to unite around the principles that have guided this nation so well. I've covered a lot of stories, but the story that remains untold is the story of America in the 21st century, when we choose to turn back the tide against progressive socialism, when we choose to embrace the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, when we remember what it is to be Americans. And that principle will not die as long as there's one man, one woman, one child who looks defiantly into the night and says, I am free.
You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
And we're back. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm Matt Holloway. Thanks for hanging in. As I said, we would get back to it, and so we shall. Good buddy of mine, hosts Common Sense Radio, Mr. AJ Davis, asked if I was referring to a Twitter battle that he and I had about a week and a half ago. No, AJ, I saved that one for you, buddy. We're going to try to have that next week where AJ and I take opposite sides of the field on the constitutionality of my recommendation of a huge border detention facility in San Diego and whether or not that meets the criteria for small government. Ooh, I've had my small government bona fides challenged. And that challenge cannot go unanswered. But look for that next week. Hopefully I'll be teaming up with AJ Davis, another one of our Lanterneers, host of Common Sense Radio. You can find them on Twitter, also on Facebook. That's Common Sense Radio on lanterns.buzz. So back to what I was saying, that little Twitter exchange between myself and Chris Merrill. I went on to explain, of course, using one of my favorite Parks and Recreation heroes there, that e.g. international law is created by treaty. Therefore, it equals treaty law. Therefore, under the provisions of Article 6, it is constitutional law. In other words, with the President's approval and Senate's ratification, correction on that, it's consent, the United Nations can write laws in and for the United States which supersede state and even federal laws. Ponder on that for a beat. Isn't that the most insane thing you ever heard? So not only do illegal immigrants in the United States have rights that are protected by the Constitution, most assuredly so, they have rights afforded to them that were not put there by the founders or even by a current sitting American legislature. No. The rights that are afforded to these illegal immigrants, these asylum seekers, were actually codified in the United Nations Convention on the Treatment of Refugees in 1951 and then reaffirmed in 1967. The United States was not a full signatory in 1951, no, I'll have you know, but we signed on in 67. So right now, the treatment of illegal immigrants as they cross the border into the United States, if they request asylum, is determined by the United Nations Convention on the Treatment of Refugees. So yes, indefatigably, illegal immigrants do have rights that are protected under the U.S. Constitution through Article 6. Those rights granted them by the United Nations in 1951 and reaffirmed in 1967. I go on to say, the Constitution is a harsh mistress. Those who uphold it must do so with courage, for it must be upheld in all parts, not merely those which are convenient or align with your ideology. If you don't like it, amend it, but until you do, you must uphold it. And I went ahead and provided the UNHCR.org document, and that's actually right over here at www.unhcr.org. Protection Basic States and Parties to the 1951 Convention related to the status of refugees and the 1967 Protocol. It's all laid out very clearly here. The United States is a party to this agreement, and this does dictate how said refugees must be treated. And under these terms, the imprisonment of children is not legal. You heard it here, folks. And anyone seeking asylum must have a full hearing before a judge. So at this time, the best response, the best possible reaction that the U.S. government could have was to take the actions that the Trump administration has. The Trump administration was not only acting on U.S. law in the form of, I believe it was the Flores settlement, which was, by the way, under Attorney General Janet Reno, President Bill Clinton, William Jefferson Clinton. Not only was the Trump administration acting in accordance with the Flores settlement, but they were acting in agreement to the Convention relating to the status of refugees, 1951, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. They were following international law. International law requires that all asylum cases are heard before a judge, and they have to be kept in the requesters have to be kept in protective custody until that time. And furthermore, the Flores Decree, or the Flores Judgment, settlement, I'll find the right word someday, requires that these children can only be held for a maximum of 20 days in detention before they are transferred either to a relative a parent in the country or a sponsor. And all of this has been going on steadily since the early 1990s. But it's only an issue now because a president who has made an enemy of the collective mainstream media and the progressive left is the one implementing it. When you go from selective enforcement of the law or prosecutorial discretion, quote unquote, under the Obama administration, and 8 years of it, to finally upholding and enforcing the law equally across all categories of illegal entrance into the United States, this is the inevitable result. And if you're so twisted about it, then why is no one paying heed to the recommendations of Senator Ted Cruz, who's brought legislation to the table that is apparently dead on arrival, which would solve this legally, which would provide for the housing of parents and children together in such a fashion as does not violate the law? No. Instead, President Donald Trump was pushed to using his executive power the very same way that his predecessor did, and executing quote-unquote prosecutorial discretion, choosing not to uphold the law evenly and equally across different classes. President Trump did make a mistake. President Trump chose to back down when he and his administration were indefatigably in the right. Was it a popular place to be? No. But that's why I tweeted that following the Constitution requires courage. It must be upheld in all parts, not merely those which are convenient or align with your ideology. If you don't like it, amend it, but until you do, you must uphold it. And if that makes you a very unpopular man, then it makes you a very unpopular man. The HoloNet right now doesn't stand side by side with Conservative Review or with the Daily Wire or with the Blaze or the Glenn Beck program. There are a couple of reasons for that. I'm new at this. I'm probably not nearly as good at it. But I stand on the firm bedrock of the Constitution, and sometimes that is a place to stand. Sometimes it royally sucks to stand in the middle and look at the left and say that the Hodges v. Overfell decision was unconstitutional and it was a judicial overreach for the Supreme Court to unilaterally grant gay marriage across the United States. The Supreme Court and the federal government really shouldn't be enforcing marriage because the 10th Amendment to the United States. And then to look simultaneously to the people on the religious right and say that the DMCA, not the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, is equally unconstitutional. Where you have to stand in the middle and say to the left, no, you can't do that, and then look to your allies, so to speak, on the right, and say, yeah, but you can't do that either. It's a crap place to stand. You don't make friends. You don't really stand up and charge up the band with your ideological fervor. No. That's not how you get 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. That's not how you get 500,000 friends on Facebook. That's not how you wind up with your own network and a top 10 show. But that's how you stand for the truth and seat reason firmly in her chair and speak truth to power. When you stand on the bedrock of our country's constitutional founding values, that is when you inevitably win. But it's going to suck for a long time. Don't lose hope. Keep faith. And hold the line against the night. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, We're going to talk a little bit about a new controversy unfolding in real time here, very local to me in Arizona. Hell, it's even here in the West Valley. That when we come back. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Yes, that's right. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm your host, Matt Holloway. We're going to take a quick look at Reuters. Jump across the pond. It appears that Recep Tayyip Erdogan, president of Turkey, has won his bid for re-election, according to Reuters. Now, that powerful presidency comes into effect after the polls. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago when the initial constitutional referendum went through. Now, what's a little bit scary about this is that the president of Turkey, who is definitely moving toward an autocracy, now has 5 years to cement it into place. So we go to that right now on Reuters. According to Reuters, Tayyip Erdogan's ruling AK party claimed victory in Turkey's presidential and parliamentary polls on Sunday, overcoming the biggest electoral challenge to their rule in a decade and a half. The main opposition party did not immediately concede defeat. After initially saying Erdogan would fall well short of a first-round victory, it said it would continue its democratic struggle, whatever the result. Our people have given us the job of carrying out the presidential and executive posts, Erdogan said in a short national address, as the votes were still being counted. I hope nobody will try to cast a shadow on the results and harm democracy in order to hide their own failure, he added, clearly aiming to preempt opposition complaints of foul play. Erdogan, 64, the most popular but the most divisive politician in modern Turkish history, later waved to the cheering, flag-waving supporters from the top of a bus in Istanbul. Excuse me. So again, 2017, there was a small majority of Turks who ushered in the 2017 referendum, allowing for a far more powerful presidency and eroding the country's status as a UN member, amidst concerns from its allies that Erdogan is going to tip the country even further toward fundamentalist Islam. So, that is an entirely new reason to keep a very close eye on Turkey as the situation develops. Now, looking back to the United States, there's a tweet that I sent out today. I retweeted the CBP, the Customs and Border Protection Agency. On a new image, they put out a new infographic, which shows in Operation Guardian Support. So, just this past year, really. As of June 20th, 2018, there have been 7,306 arrests. Hang on, let me pull that up on the big screen for the people that are watching on Facebook, because this is crazy. 7,306 arrests. 2,264 people who got to the border and turned back. There it is. 9,218 pounds of illegal drugs seized, and 37 conveyances or vehicles seized. Now, of those, 58 of them were in the Yuma sector, 260 in the Tucson sector, southern Arizona, 171 in El Paso, 75 in Big Bend, 146 in Del Rio, 183 in Laredo, 373 in the Rio Grande Valley, making by far the highest. So, Tucson sector of the Customs and Border Patrol, so southern into central Arizona, really covers most of Arizona if you look at the map. Second highest amount of arrests and seizures. And there have been 1,462 National Guard personnel assigned to the different USPP offices and CBP offices. So when people are talking about the ineffectiveness of the National Guard at the border, pull out this little gem. And note to them, historically, every time that there have been American boots on the ground in the Southwest, the border situation has improved drastically. Drastically. People have a short memory in general, in our national consciousness. But if you get down to the local, if you get down to Tucson, Ajo, Gila Bend, Yuma, places here in Arizona, and you talk to the older folks, and you ask them if the problem at the border was ever this bad, they'll tell you no. Why? Because 100 years ago, there were 2 or 3 battalions stationed along the border. At Fort Naco, down in Ajo, Gila Bend, in Columbus, New Mexico. Why? Because you had Pancho Villa raiding the frickin' border. What happened to defending the territorial integrity of a nation being the primary focus of a country's military? We've refuted posse comitatus here on this show in the past. And I'll do it again every day of the week and twice on Sunday. The border doesn't count. Posse comitatus is referring to your local sheriff snagging a battalion of troops and banging on your door with them for unpaid parking tickets, essentially. It's using the troops for domestic law enforcement. Border enforcement is not domestic law. Border enforcement falls purely under, what did we mention before? International law. So the left loves to cleave to international law as the justification for why these active border measures can't be taken. Well, sweetheart, it swings both ways. If you're going to cleave to international law, then you must concede that the border and the maintenance of the border also falls under international law, so posse comitatus does not apply. Send in the troops. And give them clear-cut rules of engagement. As one of my favorite science fiction role models, Captain Malcolm Reynolds of the Firefly-class ship Serenity said, if anybody tries to kill you, you kill them right back. And I'm telling you, it's coming down to it. Because just a bare 5 hours ago, according to the Blaze, 8 hours, Democratic Socialists of America and other groups are behind the protests at ICE facilities across the country. Just this morning, there's a protest in McKellips, Texas, where some of our Border Patrol agents were severely injured. Okay, McKellips, Texas. That should ring a bell. Because in McKellips, Texas, that's where Glenn Beck went in 2014. Dropped off soccer balls and teddy bears and food for the migrant children that were being held there from South and Central America. And he got lit up for it. But now, let's look at McAllen, Texas. Only 4 years later, 5 hours ago, leftist protesters descend on Immigration Detainment Center. Border Patrol agent left badly injured. A Border Patrol agent was injured at an immigrant detainment facility in McAllen, Texas on Saturday while trying to control a crowd of protesters attempting to stop a bus carrying immigrants from leaving the facility. According to Fox News reporter Griff Jenkins, about 200 protests from the League of United Latin American Citizens were bussed into the McAllen facility, wonder who paid for the bus, from all areas of Texas. At one point, when a bus carrying illegal immigrants tried to leave the facility, the protesters surrounded and stopped the bus. However, during the melee, a Border Patrol agent attempted to control the crowd and was injured while protecting an older woman. The agent suffered a broken ankle. Okay, so maybe not as badly injured as they made it seem at first. But during the incident, protesters screamed, "Set the children free," and "Shame on you," to Border Patrol agents who eventually helped maneuver the bus out of the facility, according to CNN. It's unclear where the bus was headed. U.S. Customs and Border Patrol told CNN the immigrants on the bus were being transferred to the custody of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. And of course, no arrests were made during the protests. Because why would you? There's a melee involving a federal agent. Why would you make any arrests? I don't know. Assaulting an officer? Disrupting the peace? These are things, aren't they? I'm pretty sure that disrupting a federal agent in the course of their duties is at least an arrestable offense. I doubt it's a felony. But come on. These people are disrupting the legal operations of a U.S. immigration center. there are limits to freedom of speech, kids. When you start trying to block and damage vehicles, You know, I want to praise the Border Patrol here for their restraint. Seriously, I honestly expect when I'm looking at a story like this to hear, 20 people were arrested, 2 or 3 were submitted to the hospital. But I'm going to give them their credit. Now, going into the last segment of the show, normally we talk about some things to look forward to in the next week, but today, unfortunately, we actually have to look to a story from right here in Arizona. It's pretty upsetting. Now, according to sources, this took place at a pharmacy here in Arizona where a woman was seeking to purchase what is in effect an abortifacient. A pill which, causes an abortion, more or less. And she was unable to do so. And this one is really one of those heartbreaking situations where you must rely on your moral compass. And your moral compass tells you that when someone has deeply held convictions, they must be protected under our laws. But there is definitely a limitation to the protection and a way to handle things. And there's also a way you should not. Now, according to Fox News, and I've actually read this in a Facebook post, which originally came from the woman this happened to herself. Okay, a pharmacist denied her medication for her miscarriage medicine over the personal beliefs. Fox goes on to say, an Arizona woman said she is deeply upset after a pharmacist refused to provide her with miscarriage medication because it went against his personal beliefs. The woman took to Facebook Friday to explain just days earlier her doctor had said she was going to suffer a miscarriage. Unfortunately, on Tuesday, we found out the baby's development had stopped and that she would ultimately have a miscarriage. She said she'd had one miscarriage before, she wrote. When offered the option of undergoing a hospital procedure to deal with the miscarriage or taking prescribed medicine, she accepted the latter. The woman went to the pharmacy located in Peoria, Arizona, roughly 13 miles northwest of Phoenix, to pick up the prescription, but the pharmacist refused to give her the medication. She said, I stood at the mercy of this pharmacist explaining my situation in front of my 7-year-old and 5 customers standing behind only to be denied because of his ethical beliefs. She said she left the pharmacy in tears, ashamed and feeling humiliated by a man who knows nothing of her struggles. Said her prescription was transferred to another store across town where she was able to pick it up without an issue. She said she contacted the store manager, who did not seem happy about what had happened, and reached out to the corporate office. She also filed a complaint with the Arizona Board of Pharmacy. The company's policy, according to Fox 10, allows pharmacists to reject prescription requests if they have moral objections, but they're still required to refer the prescriptions to the other pharmacist or manager on duty. They said in a statement that they're looking into the matter to ensure that their patients' needs are handled properly. On the surface, it would appear that the pharmacist acted in accordance with his company's policy and with his own conscience. Now, anyone who's ever gone through the horror of a miscarriage, and I say anyone, really it's any woman, but any father who's had to stand there feeling helpless and useless and unable to assuage a kind of pain that we as men cannot rightly understand, knows how horrible a situation this is. But there does come a point where another person's rights to constitutionally protected freedom of religion and freedom of conscience, their rights, trump your feelings. And in this situation, while my heart breaks for the mother who's suffering through this tragedy right now, as a person who has felt this kind of shattering pain in my own life, without going into too much detail, my heart breaks for her and for her family, and I'm praying for them today that they find comfort and solace. But I do sincerely hope that this pharmacist's career is not cut short because he stood by his conscience. Because someone's rights are a fact. And facts don't have feelings. Someone's freedom of conscience and freedom of religion must be upheld in this country. And to rights, from what I can see, this woman was eventually provided with the medication that she needed. The way it went down should have been done better. I think there's no reason that this person could not be dispensed their medication at that very location by a different pharmacist. Typically, there are more than one pharmacist to a location, to my understanding. Or the pharmacy, the prescription can be filled at another location and sent there. I don't know. There should have been a better way to go about this that was more sensitive to the patient's feelings, and I feel that it was a poor care experience based on what I've read. But we cannot begin to trample the religious rights of others in the name of our own convenience, in the name of our own feelings. People have been pulling up the Red Chicken restaurant, or whatever it is, the Red Chick restaurant, where they told Sarah Huckabee Sanders, you can't eat here because you work for the president. People have compared this to the, I believe it was Majestic Bakers or whatever it was, the bakers who refused to make the cake for the gay couple and the Supreme Court judgment there. And they're trying to hold that up side by side and say, yeah, well, you can't be mad at the restaurant for throwing out Sarah Huckabee Sanders if you support the baker's right to refuse service. Well, how about this one for a beat? Here's a real example where no matter how you face it, there's no answer that you're going to feel good about. And that's why I think this story isn't getting as much play. Because you can't feel good about it. You don't get that righteous indignation in your belly about it, do you? No. Because it sucks all around. It's a god-awful experience for a woman who's already had her heart ripped out of her chest by a pain that many people cannot begin to understand in their lives. And at the same time, it's horrible for the pharmacist, who's basically been doxxed to the whole world and is now likely fighting for his very career. Which is why he, nor the patient, nor even the pharmacy were named on this program. I don't see the need to do so. I don't see the need to spread that fire. But that is the comparison that you should take when we're talking about the right to refuse service and the right of freedom of conscience and freedom of religion in this country. Sometimes you got to make the crap call. Sometimes you have to make the decision that doesn't feel good. But it's right. And upholding that pharmacist's freedom of religion is right. Does it suck? Yeah. But sometimes you just have to grow the hell up. Find something positive this week. Find something you love doing and do it. I'll leave you with that as the cheery note at the end of this HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. From Phoenix, I'm your host, Matt Holloway. Good night. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.